Dobro. History. Archive.
Okay, so picture this. It's Christmas Eve. You're 17, flying home for the holidays. And then, out of nowhere, a flash of lightning, this deafening roar, and then just silence. You're not in the plane anymore. You're falling, still strapped to your seat. This is not a nightmare. It's the real beginning of one of the most unbelievable survival stories you will ever hear. And it all boils down to one simple question. How is any of this even possible?
We're talking about 10,000 feet. That's about 2 miles, straight up. That's the altitude Lanza Flight 508 was at when it was hit by lightning over the Peruvian Amazon. The plane didn't just crash, it disintegrated, and everyone on board was thrown out into the storm, plunging towards the jungle below.
There were 92 people on that flight, passengers and crew, all just trying to get home for Christmas. And in an instant, 91 of their journeys ended in absolute tragedy.
Which leaves just one, a single, solitary survivor, a 17-year-old girl named Juliane Koepcke.
Yeah, that's the big question, right? How could anyone survive a 2-mile fall from the sky and then survive for 11 days, all alone, severely injured, in the middle of the Amazon rainforest? Well, the answer isn't some simple miracle. It's this stunning convergence of physics, biology, and a lifetime of very unique preparation.
To really get how this happened, we have to understand this wasn't just any flight. The story doesn't start with that bolt of lightning. No, it starts with the airline itself, an airline that had a truly terrifying reputation.
You have to understand, Lanza was infamous in Peru. Just a year before this, another one of their planes went down, killing 101 people. Their maintenance was notoriously bad, and Juliane's father, a scientist, he knew the risks. His warning to his wife, "Please fly with anyone else," is just absolutely chilling to hear now.
And the plane itself? This specific aircraft, OBR 941, was a huge part of the problem. It wasn't just maintained poorly, it was apparently a Frankenstein plane, literally cobbled together from spare parts of other aircraft. It was the last of its kind in their fleet, and they were flying it straight into a known storm front because they were under pressure to keep up with the Christmas rush.
So despite all the risks, the pilots flew right into this massive thunderstorm. The turbulence got violent, Christmas presents were flying out of the overhead bins, and in that moment, Juliane's mother, Maria, just turned to her and said, with this calm finality, "That is the end, it's all over." Just seconds later, a lightning strike hit the fuel tank, and the plane just came apart.
And just like that, Juliana was outside, falling. The roar of the engines was gone, replaced by the sound of the wind. So the first mystery we have to solve here is a purely physical one. How on earth did she survive the impact?
Well, it wasn't any one thing. It was a perfect storm of impossible events. First, the entire row of seats she was strapped to started spinning as it fell, kind of like a maple seed. This autorotation created a ton of aerodynamic drag, which slowed her down a lot. Second, the very storm that tore the plane apart might have actually saved her. She probably fell through a powerful updraft, which is a column of rising air that acted like a giant atmospheric brake. And finally, she didn't hit solid ground. She crashed into the thick, multi-layered jungle canopy, which acted like a massive natural crumple zone, absorbing that final deadly impact.
But surviving the fall? That was just the beginning. She woke up the next day, Christmas morning, alone, seriously hurt, on the floor of the Amazon. A brand new, and maybe even more difficult challenge had just begun. And let's be really clear here, she was not okay. She had a severe concussion, a broken collarbone, strained vertebrae, and deep gashes on her arm and leg. On top of all that, the fall had burst capillaries in her eyes, and she lost her glasses, which meant she was severely nearsighted. She was badly injured, couldn't see well, and was totally, completely alone. Now, for most of us, this place would be the green hell, a terrifying, chaotic wall of green. But not for Juliane. And this is where her story gets so unique. Her parents were world-famous zoologists who ran a research station right there in the jungle. She grew up there. So where others saw chaos, she saw a system. Where others saw only threats, she understood the rules of the ecosystem. And that knowledge, that was her single greatest weapon.
And this right here, this was the single most important rule her father had ever taught her. This one piece of advice became her mantra, her guiding star, her map out of that wilderness.
So she put that advice into practice right away. After she woke up, she found a small bag of sweets, which was the only food she'd have for the next 10 days, and she started searching.
By day 4, she found a small spring and just started walking, following the water as it grew from a tiny trickle to a stream and then into a river. As the days dragged on, the sweets ran out, her strength was failing, and she started hallucinating. But she just kept going, pushed on by her father's words. And then, on day 9, she made a discovery that is just horrifying. The deep cut on her arm, which was open to the humid air and all the flies, had gotten infected, but it was so much worse than a simple infection.
In her own words, she realized that fly larvae, maggots, were living inside the wound. They were eating her alive from the inside out. I mean, the psychological terror of that discovery is hard to even imagine. But again, her unique childhood was about to provide the key to her survival.
So the condition is called miasmus, and on the 10th day, she stumbled upon an empty lumberman's hut, and inside she found a can of gasoline. She remembered her father using kerosene to treat a similar problem in their dog. So, despite the unbelievable pain it must have caused, she poured gasoline into her own open wound. This forced the maggots out so she could pull them out one by one. It was a horrifying but absolutely life-saving act of self-surgery. The very next day, 3 lumbermen came back to that hut, and their first reaction when they saw this pale, injured girl stumbling out of the jungle wasn't compassion, it was fear. You see, local legends talk about these dangerous water spirits that looked just like her. It was only when she spoke to them in Spanish and explained what happened that the spell was broken, and they rushed to help her.
Her rescue marked the end of an 11-day ordeal. But the story doesn't stop there. The aftermath would bring incredible heartbreak, but also a powerful new purpose to her life.
And this is probably the most tragic part of the whole story. Once the rescue teams located the wreckage, they figured out that Juliane's mother, Maria, had also survived the fall. But her injuries were just too severe for her to move. She died alone several days later, likely while Juliane was trekking for help not far away.
But Juliane didn't let this immense trauma destroy her. Instead, she fully embraced her parents' legacy. She went back to Germany, got a PhD in biology, and eventually she took over as the director of the Panguana research station her parents had built. She dedicated her entire life to studying and preserving the exact same rainforest that had taken her mother but had saved her own life.
In her own words, she completely reframed the experience. For her, the Amazon was never the green hell. The canopy cushioned her fall, the stream guided her to safety, and her knowledge of its rules let her survive its dangers. The jungle wasn't her enemy, it was her savior. So, we're left with this question. Was it a miracle? Maybe. I mean, the physics of the fall were definitely a 1 in a billion chance. But surviving the jungle for 11 days? That wasn't a miracle. That was knowledge. That was preparation. It was a lifetime of learning that turned a hostile wilderness into a readable map. And it proves that sometimes what you know is every bit as important as how lucky you are.